Hi, this is Ashley, and this is my Tableau presentation. Today, we'll be looking at the employee salaries data set. And as we can see here, this data, it provides us with the gender, the current annual salary, the 2017 gross pay received, the 2017 overtime pay. It goes into departments, the assignment, whether it was full-time position or a part-time position, whether the position was underfilled, even the date when the employee was first hired. Now, with this information or this data, we're able to gain a valuable information, and we're able to do this with we are able to visualize this information through Tableau by means of sheets. And this is our first sheet. Now, before we're even able to visualize it on our sheets, we have to ask ourselves some very important questions. What is it that we want to get out of this data? Now, we have a lot of information that we can get out from this. And the first information or question that I ask myself is that I would like to know which department receives the highest pay. And this is where I jump into my sheet, which is one way in which we can gain a visual analytics of the data that we were given. Now, here to the far left, we see where we have the column names right here. The column names were presented on the left. And all we do is that I simply dragged each column name. So we have the department name, I dragged it to the row. And then I dragged gross pay, overtime pay, and the current annual salary, and I dragged all three of them to the columns. We can also see where Tableau divided them almost as if, this is the qualitative, or they call them the measure names. And then we have the measure values that have to deal with digits and qualitative measurements. I mean, quantitative measurements. Now, when we take a look at this, what I wanted to see was which department receives the highest pay. And from the get-go, we're able to see that the department that receives the highest pay, which is the gross pay, is the Department of Police, coming in at $152,860,643. In addition to this, by hovering over this bar for the Department of Police, I'm also able to see the overtime pay that they received in 2017 and the current annual salary. But we can also gain valuable information from this as well. When we look in the 2017 overtime pay, we are able to see right here that fire and rescue services has the most overtime pay of $25,671,656. And as a manager looking at this, we wonder, why is this fire and rescue service department pulling in so much overtime? Is it that they're understaffed? That could also be an issue that we are when it comes down to a financial aspect for the company. So this is actually valuable information as well that we just retrieved. We also see where the Department of Police also has a great amount of overtime, but just focusing on fire and rescue services, we see where it's much more. The next sheet that we have is a gender versus department, which is a very good a sheet where we're able to see the department name here. If you just hover over the columns, we're able to see the department names. And in the row section, I put gender. So columns was department name and rows is gender. And the value that I wanted was the current annual salary. And just by looking at this, we're able to see the difference in pay for each gender. And we're able to see, is it, we can check to see if there's a disparity going on, for example, or if it's just that there is more females in the Department of Health and Human Services than there is males. Because we see here where they're coming in at 98, 99 million, and the males are at 21 million. Let's see. We have a function where we left click and we click on explain data. And we see here where this value of 98 million is made of 1,338 records. And let's take a look at how many records this is made up out of. It's made up out of $247. So we can see here where it's a issue, where it's just a case where there are just more women in this department than there is males, which is a very cool feature about Tableau, because we're able to get a backstory from regarding or values. Because sometimes just looking on certain values, we can create a story and say, well, they're getting more pay. But just seeing here, we recognize that that's not the case. It's just that there's just more persons from one gender than the other. And then I did another sheet where instead of putting a gender in the row, I actually switched it out for the current annual salary. In the previous sheet, it was here. And now I'm putting it in the row section. And I'm using gender as basically like my filter. And we're able to see the same information. However, it's a different visual. And this is now presented differently to our audience. So it shows the flexibility of Tableau. Another important thing is another question that I probably wanted to ask myself when looking at this data. I wanted to see the salaries, if there's any correlation between the year you started in this company versus your salary, if there's any correlation between the two. And one example, what we can take a look at, let's say we want to look at 1982. So the males for 1982 was 1,462,345, and the woman was 789. Women are highlighted in a light purple and the men in blue. So we see here that in 1982 it was at 1.4 million, and then women was at 789. Let's take a look at what it is in 2015. 2015, women's at 10 million, and the men they're at 13. And so many may wonder, is it a case where persons that started in 1982, they're getting paid less than the persons that are in 2015? Again, we can look at the backstory of these values by taking a look at the records. Now let's take a look at the records to see how much this 692,000 represents. So we're going to right click, explain data, and we see here where it represents 6%, 6 records is what is represented here. Now let's take a look at this. How much this 13 million represents. Voila, it represents 219 219 records for this 13 million, which again is it's a very unique feature that Tableau has. Now let's take a look at something else. So we have another column here, um, underfilled versus overtime, which is really important because earlier when we were looking on the gross pay versus overtime, we realized that fire and rescue services, that department had the most overtime. And we were wondering whether or not this overtime came from if they were underfilled or understaffed. And now we're actually coming up on a sheet that will highlight that for us. So what I did was that I took, because we wanted to know what was going on with these departments. So I took underfilled, position underfilled here, and then I also placed the department name. And then I also placed the rows, the sum in the rows of the overtime. Wanted to know if there was any correlation between the overtime and being understaffed. And right here, the highest one, it says fire and rescue services. And we see here where there is a correlation between being underfilled and being underfilled and overtime. Now let's move on to dashboard. Now, dashboards are a way to present one or more views with filters, and they can include sheets. My dashboard, they include sheets, as you can see here. And these dashboards are able to provide a more concise view of the information that you want to present. And to create a dashboard, all we do is that we can click right here. We click New Dashboard, and then we're able to drag and drop. So we can drag, drop. And there you go. That's your dashboard. And then you're able to move it. You have your filters. That's right here. You have your legends that you can put, your filters, and your highlights as well. So let's go back to delete this. And then let's go back to our dashboard. So here is our dashboard. So remember our prior sheets where we were looking on gender versus department, and then we had gender versus department version 2. I decided to put them both in the dashboard where we are able to take a look at all of this information together at once. Just by clicking on each of them, you're able to get a breakdown of what they all represent. And this is the end of my presentation for Tableau, as we were able to see how we're able to make sheets, how we're able to analyze the data, present the data, and also present it in a dashboard. Thank you.